Violence in Venezuela. Lawmakers address the political turmoil in this socialist country and what should come next. We're on Capitol Hill. Cardinal convicted. A church leader in France is found guilty of concealing sexual abuse. International Women of Courage. The First Lady and the Secretary of State honor a Catholic nun from South Sudan. She'll tell us about it. And time to give up. A Catholic priest tells us how to get the most out of Lent. On EWTN News Nightly for Thursday, March 7th, 2019. Good evening from Washington, D.C., and thank you to those of you joining us from around the world for news from a Catholic perspective. I'm Lauren Ashburn. We're tracking new concerns tonight about military activity in North Korea. One of the country's nuclear and missile facilities is reportedly buzzing with activity. And President Donald Trump says it could be a long time before we know how peace talks will go. White House correspondent Mark Irons reports. Good evening, Mark.
Good evening, Lauren. President Trump walked out of last month's summit with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un because they couldn't reach a deal. The U.S. wants North Korea to denuclearize, but the North wants sanctions lifted first. The president was asked about this recent setback today while meeting with the leader of the Czech Republic in the Oval Office.
You're disappointed in Kim Jong-un about the nuclear activity in North Korea?
A little disappointed, a little bit. We'll see. We'll let you know in about a year.
The president has said he has a good relationship with Chairman Kim, but the situation in North Korea seems to be growing worse. South Korea's spy agency says it's detected new activity at a research center where the North is believed to build long-range missiles targeting the U.S. mainland. North Korea is also said to be restoring facilities at a rocket launch site that it partially dismantled last year. The White House is also facing more pressure from lawmakers. The Senate Intelligence Committee is interested in re-interviewing Donald Trump Jr. and other witnesses after President Trump's former lawyer, Michael Cohen, spoke to the committee last week. Cohen just filed a lawsuit claiming the Trump organization failed to pay nearly $2 million toward his legal defense. Lauren?
White House correspondent Mark Irons. Thank you, Mark. Congressional Democrats today announced legislation to reinstate what they call reproductive rights into the State Department's annual Human Rights Report. We asked the bill's sponsor if this is one more sign Democrats are becoming the party of death.
This is a party that continuously supports making sure that women have the rights to make decisions, that when they make a decision to have a child, that they have all the help necessary to have a healthy child.
The Democrats' bill is supported by pro-abortion groups, including Planned Parenthood. Last year, pro-life human rights groups praised the Trump administration for excluding abortion as a human right in that annual report. An American freelance reporter who has written for the Catholic News Service is free after being arrested yesterday in Venezuela. Millions have fled that country, racked with a lack of food, sinking economy, and controversy over who is the valid leader. The United States says President Nicolas Maduro is illegitimate. Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi spoke to Venezuelans and senators. Good evening, Jason.
Good evening, Lauren. Trump administration Special Envoy Elliot Abrams says there's no plans to use the U.S. military in Venezuela. The president last month said all options were on the table. Abrams says even more sanctions will soon be announced. The U.S. is among 50 countries recognizing Juan Guaido as interim president.
Venezuelan Americans at the Capitol tell me Nicolas Maduro isn't the rightful president.
Some of the opposition, members of the opposition were in jail. So how can they rally? How can they look for support if they are not allowed to run? They weren't allowed to run. So he ran himself and he controlled the elections. It was complete fraud.
The American government agrees.
The Maduro regime has no legitimacy.
But Venezuela used to be Latin America's wealthiest country.
Its leaders have stolen literally everything they can get their hands on.
Police yesterday detained and later deported American journalist Cody Weddle. He's a contributor for Catholic News Service.
He's trying to intimidate the media.
The U.S. government recognizes National Assembly President Juan Guaido. He spoke after Ash Wednesday Mass. In this country, that's more than 70% Catholic.
La única causa de la emergencia humanitaria, la única.
He says the only cause of the humanitarian emergency is Nicolas Maduro. In San Cristobal, lines stretch a mile to get gas. Beatriz Davaldi is number 223 in line.
Además de la cola de la gasolina, ¿qué otras colas?
She says she also waits 4 or more hours to buy groceries. Today on Capitol Hill, there's hope for Venezuela's future.
When they return home, and I believe that they will provide a surge of energy into that economy that will greatly mobilize the rebuilding.
The UN says some 3 million people have fled Venezuela in recent years. One pro-Maduro Supreme Court judge accused Guaido of illegally claiming power. President Maduro says he's facing one of the biggest battles he could ever imagine. He blames North American imperialism and calls for unity to defend their homeland. Lauren?
Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi. Thank you, Jason. Cardinal Philippe Barbarin of France says he will offer his resignation to Pope Francis. A court found him guilty today of failing to report allegations of sex abuse.
J'ai décidé d'aller voir le Saint-Père.
The Cardinal says the Holy Father will receive him in a few days. He expressed compassion for the alleged victim. EWTN's Rome Bureau Chief Alan Holdren has more.
Lauren, Cardinal Barbarin was convicted today for failing to report allegations of sex abuse of minors by a priest in his Diocese of Lyon. The priest confessed to abusing Boy Scouts in the 1970s and 80s. The Cardinal learned of the cases in 2014 and didn't report them to the authorities. The court said that he had the obligation to do so because the alleged victims didn't request secrecy. 5 other defendants were acquitted. So this decision is being seen as a strong signal to the Catholic Church. The alleged victims say this is a victory and no one is above the law. They also say that top clergy were aware of the abuser priest's actions since 1991, but allowed him to continue in contact with children until his retirement in 2015. He'll be put to trial next year. This conviction comes 2 weeks after Cardinal George Pell of Australia was found guilty of sex abuse. Just like Pell, Cardinal Barbarin is expected to appeal the decision. He's not expected to spend any time in jail. Back to you, Lauren.
Thank you, Alan. Bishop Robert Barron, who the Wall Street Journal called the Bishop of Catholic Media, says the scandals in the church are heartbreaking. But his answer has been to share his faith with the world.
The sex abuse scandal has been like a cloud over the whole of my priesthood practically, because it started in Chicago in the early 90s is when the first rumblings of it. I was ordained in 86, and so most of my priesthood, I've operated under the cloud of this whole thing.
The auxiliary bishop of the Archdiocese of Los Angeles received an honorary degree today from the Pontifical University of St. Thomas Aquinas, also known as the Angelicum. Bishop Barron is the founder of Word on Fire, a Catholic media company. Joining me now is J.D. Flynn, editor-in-chief for Catholic News Agency. J.D., nice to see you again.
Thanks so much for having me, Lauren.
We just heard Bishop Barron say how hurt he was over this sex abuse crisis. It's had a negative impact on him. I've talked to priests all across the country who say it's had a negative impact on him, and I'm pretty sure they're going to say the same thing to you.
Sure. Yeah, I do talk to a lot of priests, and I think most of them would say that they have been hurt in the last few months as they've seen the experience of this scandal unfold. They've felt the confusion that we have felt as ordinary Catholics, waiting to see how the Church will respond to this, uncertainty about why some of these things have happened or have been allowed to have happened, and perhaps feeling that more acutely because of their close relationship with their bishops. But, it's helpful for me to remember there are more than 40,000 priests in this country, and so the experiences of those men will be as diverse as it would be for ordinary Catholics.
I was struck by the fact, J.D. Flynn, today that the Vatican came out and said the number of priests is down for the first time in a decade. Do you think that this church sexual abuse crisis will continue to have an impact on those numbers?
Well, I guess that remains to be seen in terms of what the bishops will do here in the United States to invite men to priesthood, even in a time when it's difficult to be a Catholic priest, when it's difficult to be identifiably Catholic in public, how the bishops in the United States will invite men to that life. Of course, in some ways, being a priest is always being a sign of contradiction. And so hopefully men who enter the seminary will have that understanding and will be perhaps even fortified in this experience.
What does that mean, a sign of contradiction?
To be as a priest in our culture, to be a celibate in a hypersexualized culture, to have, abandoned yourself to providence in a culture in which we're consumed with concerns about security, to be obedient in a culture of radical individualism and independence. The life of a priest, of a religious brother or sister, is a sign of our hope for something greater than what's in this world.
I want to switch topics. You're a canon lawyer. We heard this week that Tennessee Right for Life, 3 bishops in Tennessee are against the heartbeat bill. When I heard that, I thought, what the heck is that about? Sure. They cite high costs fighting the battle, and they say that this measure has failed across the country. Is this defeatist?
Well, I think the bishops themselves are trying to be as prudent as they can be about what's possible in their legislature and then will be possible in the courts. And of course, not having had the inside view on the situation of the legislature that they have, I think some deference can be made there. The bishops of Tennessee, by and large, have strong pro-life records, and I think it's important to take that into consideration. In the past, bishops have held back on other kinds of pro-life initiatives because of the practical considerations connected to them. So I think that's where they're coming from, and we certainly hope to get into it more and to understand more concretely where their concerns are coming from.
What's the trend? Is the trend that you're seeing toward more pro-life heartbeat bills or other bills like that? Or based on your vast experience, are you seeing sort of a shrinking of the number of pro-life bills?
Well, it's interesting because there's really a split emerging, isn't there, between states where aggressive expansion of abortion protection is moving forward in the legislature, and then states where things like heartbeat bills or parental notification laws or hospital relationship policies have come into play.
Whether or not you can have admitting privileges at a hospital if you work at an abortion clinic.
So I think the state legislatures right now are evidencing the divide among Americans about whether legal protection for abortion should be expanded or not, and about, I think, concern that a lot of people have about what the Supreme Court will do with Roe versus Wade.
Yes, and I think that I just read an article recently that talks about John Roberts, the Chief Justice, and his sway over the vote and on abortion. Thank you so much, J.D.
Sure.
Flynn. Appreciate having you here, Editor-in-Chief for Catholic News Agency.
Thanks for having me, Lauren.
Coming up, a Catholic nun is honored at the U.S. State Department. She tells us about her work in war-torn South Sudan. First Lady Melania Trump honored women from around the world. She and Secretary of State Mike Pompeo hosted the annual International Women of Courage Awards. Among the honorees, a Catholic nun inspired by her faith to help the weak and marginalized in South Sudan. We'll talk to Sister Orla in just a minute. But first, correspondent Wyatt Goolsby attended the awards. He joins us from the State Department. Good evening, Wyatt.
Good evening, Lauren. This year's awardees included 10 women from nearly every continent. The ceremony highlights the advocating for human rights and the advancement of women and young girls, often in the world's most dangerous places. The one thing they all have in common, they're willing to put themselves at risk to do the right thing. First Lady Melania Trump joining Secretary Mike Pompeo at the State Department to honor the winners of the International Women of Courage Awards. Since 2007, the State Department has highlighted more than 120 women from scores of countries who are advocates for social justice, human rights, and gender equality.
Courage takes sacrifice, bravery, and humility. It is the ability to put others first. The courage of women throughout our history continues to inspire us.
Among the awardees, a Catholic missionary, Sister Orla Tracy. Originally from Ireland, Sister Orla works in war-torn South Sudan. She and her congregation, the Institute of the Blessed Virgin Mary, have helped little girls who are often forced into marriage and denied an education. Sister Orla is the third Catholic sister to receive a Courage Award in the last 3 years. Last year, Sister Maria Elena Barini was honored for risking her life to serve war-torn communities in Africa. And in 2017, Sister Carol Tahan won the award for her work in helping those displaced in the Syrian civil war. Former Congressman Frank Wolf, who attended today's ceremony, tells me every year he sees Catholics and other Christians who are inspired by their faith to help the poor, the weak, and the vulnerable.
You go into Sudan, it's Dr. Tom, a Catholic doctor in the Nuba Mountains. You go into Egypt, it's Mama Maggie, Orthodox Christian. You go into northern Iraq, it's a Christian community. People of faith are making the difference. And I'll tell you, if you ever eliminate the people of faith in these places would fall apart.
Frank Wolf also tells me he's thankful to the State Department officials for keeping up this tradition of honoring women around the world. Many of the winners today say they're thankful not only for the award itself, but also for shining the spotlight on the plight of innocent men, women, and children. Lauren?
Correspondent Wyatt Goolsby, what a great event, reporting from the State Department. Thank you, Wyatt. Sister Orla Tracy joins me now. Congratulations! Welcome to our broadcast.
Thank you, and I'm delighted to be here.
Let me see the bling.
Beautiful.
Beautiful,
Thank
Sister.
you.
This is wonderful. Sister Orla Tracy, Vatican. Vatican. So the Vatican submitted you to do this. I want to know about South Sudan because it's a very rough place.
I think South Sudan has gone through various different experiences in the last few years. When we went to South Sudan in 2006, it was a time of peace. The government had just signed a peace agreement, time of hope, time of development. Sadly, in December 2013, that became unraveled as conflict started between our leaders, and that's the situation we've been living in for the last few years.
52% of girls in South Sudan are married before the age of 18. How is your school helping to change that?
Yeah, I think South Sudan is, as the president once described it to us, South Sudan is a new country, and it's a country that we are building. It's not like Syria or Afghanistan where it's already, it's been destroyed, whatever. South Sudan was never built. So everything is from the ground up, and girl-child education would be a huge factor in that. When we went to South Sudan, it was very clear the bishop had invited us to begin a girls' boarding secondary school because girls in South Sudan were not going to school. They definitely weren't going to secondary school.
They were illiterate?
Hugely. I mean, the percentage in our area, I don't know any woman my age in our community who is literate, because these women would have grown up through war times, and you can imagine their daughters then. Even the idea of education is very far from their mind. What is a school? How does a school work? So you're talking from the bottom up, trying to build that. And marriage has been a very strong part of the culture of the South Sudanese, particularly the Dinka that we work with. And girls marrying at a young age would be part of that culture.
How young?
Well, you could be, I think 9% of 15-year-olds are married in South Sudan. 9-year-old girls will be married. So it starts from the bottom down. Trying to get the girls into secondary school is already a miracle. We would say about 7% of girls might finish primary school. Some of those will go to secondary school, not all, and about 3% will finish secondary school. So it's trying to teach the parents the value of education and also to delay the marriage until after they've been educated.
What's the best way to help you?
Well, the biggest thing for us on the ground is about trying to sensitize the community around girl-child education and the benefits for girl-child education. And that's been a great success. Last year we had 15 girls graduate from Catholic University in Juba and in East Africa. That's been huge for us. And I think parents are now beginning to trust us, and they're beginning to see that it is a value and that the girls can also contribute towards their families. But again, as we're in a conflict situation, parents don't have the means to educate their children or to send their children to school. So 96% of what we do is donor dependent.
Well, let us help you, since you've done such a wonderful job helping the girls and the women of South Sudan. Why don't you give us the website where people can donate?
Yeah, we're very grateful for people's support. We have a website, www.lorettorumbek.ie. That's LORETORUMBEK.ie. And within that website, we have the means to donate now.
Thank you so much for joining us. Sister Orla Tracy, Head Administrator of Loretto Rumbek Mission in South Sudan.
Thank you, and lovely to be here.
Amid tears, gasps, and handshakes, a House committee in Georgia takes the first step to ban abortion once a baby's heartbeat is detected, sometime after 6 weeks. Critics say it jeopardizes women's health. Abortion currently is allowed in the state up to 20 weeks. The measure may soon head to the full House. Tonight on EWTN Pro-Life Weekly, Hollywood couple Kirk and Chelsea Cameron share their experience with adoption. They have a message for parents.
Pregnancy is a miracle. It's not a problem. There are people who could help you through, and there are, whether you choose to raise a baby, God's grace and His help and His strength will be with you.
You can see more of Catherine Hadrow's interview tonight at 10 p.m. Eastern on EWTN. Up next, the Catholic priest tells us how to have the best Lent possible, and a development that's music to the ears of the faithful in California. Today, Pope Francis told priests in the Diocese of Rome not to be discouraged by the abuse scandals rocking the church around the world. The Holy Father said God is purifying the church and freeing it from hypocrisy. As Lent begins, the Pope also spent time hearing confessions. Father Robert Gall, a professor of ethics at the Pontifical University of the Holy Cross, joins us from Rome. Father, welcome to our broadcast.
Hi, Lauren.
You know, the Pope spoke this morning of purification for the church. Can you give us some practical tips about how we can purify ourselves this Lenten season?
Well, some people say that Lent is a time of suffering. In fact, some say have a dreadful Lent. But Lent should be a joyful time because that purification should open us up so that we can absorb the blessings from the Lord our God so that we can enjoy His delightfulness.
In light of the scandals in the Catholic Church, what do you think bishops and priests can do to lead by example this Lent?
Well, of course, we've seen recently that the Church is suffering. The Church is in need of purification. Unfortunately, members of the hierarchy are in need of purification. But all of the baptized faithful have this opportunity to embrace the cross of Jesus and renew that their faith is not in hierarchs, it's not in bishops or in cardinals and prelates, but our faith is truly in Jesus. And this is this opportunity for purification that we can renew our faith so we can come to realize in a deeper way that our Christian faith is because we follow Jesus.
All right, let's get down to some brass tacks here. People may forget what our obligations as Catholics are during Lent. Many give up chocolate and pizza. So remind us what we are supposed to be doing, what we should be giving up, what principles should guide us.
Well, the strict requirements are that we abstain from meat on the Fridays during Lent, and of course on Ash Wednesday too, and that we practice fast on Ash Wednesday and on Good Friday. Those are, let's say, the minimal requirements. But all of us with a spirit of generosity, really striving to embrace Jesus' cross, should offer something else up. What's most important is that we offer up the suffering that comes our way that we don't choose, and that we make sure that our sacrifices aren't sacrifices for others, but instead that they be signs of generosity. And that's why with Lent we should practice what's traditionally considered fasting, alms, and prayer. And we should certainly not forget the prayer part. In fact, mental prayer is a wonderful way for us to open ourselves to the blessings that God wants to offer us during this time.
Can we ask what you are doing for Lent?
Well, of course, it's a very personal question.
I know,
I'm trying
I know.
to go deeper in my mental prayer. And which also involves using electronic, let's say, not just social media, but news sites and so forth, in a way that's more temperate, that's more in accord with my schedule. And that's a real challenge. And I'm also practicing fasting in a way that I'm trying to make it maybe more biblical.
You know, I'm with you on these devices right here. Oh, you can see a picture of my dogs there. But they're addicting, and I think it's just so important to be mindful about staying off of them when you can and having real conversations like the one we just had. Thank you so much for joining us, Father Robert Gall with the Pontifical University of the Holy Cross.
Thank you, Lauren. God bless you.
Finally tonight, the Catholic Cathedral in the Diocese of Orange in California is installing a new organ. And it's not just any old musical instrument. This one has 16,000 pipes and will take several months to install. The Hazel Wright organ is the 5th largest in the world, part of a $77 million transformation of a former televangelist's church to Christ Cathedral. The head of the diocese tells Orange County Register he hopes the music will inspire people to go out and make the world a better place. And that's an inspiring message. For all of us here at EWTN News Nightly, to all of you around the world, thank you for watching. I'm Lauren Ashburn. Let's keep in touch online. Follow me at Lauren Ashburn on Twitter and Lauren Ashburn EWTN on Facebook. And a special thanks to JD, who came in and was on the program. He's with Catholic News Agency, Editor-in-Chief. Good night, and God bless you.